Alex here with Flower Street Urban Gardens. We're going to be talking composting today and just how important that is. You know, composting is something that's been done for centuries, probably thousands of years, naturally and really with the trees dropping the leaves. But house composting is something that is hugely important for all of us to do all the time, but no time more important than now. Because a lot of us are going to be doing gardening for the first time, and there's nothing better than compost to put into your garden, into your soil, to amend it, to grow healthy vegetables and food for yourself and your family and your community. So there's a lot of different ways to compost. You know, just Mother Nature dropping leaves on the ground and breaking them up in a pile, those are going to break down, and you can collect that. Some people will just put a pile together. In a wet area, you could, or a dry area, you could put a tarp or some old trash bags, anything on it, or you could just leave it open. Here in Arizona specifically, there's a few things that you want to think about. One is, because of our summer months, you probably will have to water the compost to keep it moist. You want it sort of like a damp sponge, a sponge that you've wet and then wrung it out really good. That's about the moisture content that you need into the compost. And then I have these tumblers just to make it easier for me, and these tumblers work really great. Now this morning I've already emptied out this one, and I use the sift, and we have some really amazing compost here that's ready to go into the garden. Now, just screen it through. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna start emptying this one out. I know I see a lot of people online that have these types of tumblers, and these are inexpensive. A lot of times you can even find them on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist that are used for very little money, or a lot of people are giving these away. I only bought one of these. My neighbor had one and never used it, and a swarm of bees went in there and created a hive, so he was afraid of using it anymore, thinking that it would create bees coming into his backyard, which is a good thing by itself. But the only reason why they did that is because it wasn't actively used. You know, if you're just sitting it there, Mother Nature's gonna find a way and use this kind of stuff as well. So as long as you're out here every once in a while turning it and things like that, you're not gonna have any kind of issues. Now this one is a tumbler, so it does rotate. The main thing is, when you're using this type of a tumbler, the easiest way to do it, it's great with these hinges back here. If you open it up about vertical, you can slide it off. It has these pins that go into the hinge, and you can slide the lid off and set that aside, and it's going to be a lot easier to work. Now on the right side here, there is a locking mechanism to lock the tumbler in place, and what we're going to do is we're just going to rotate it and dump out a little bit of this beautiful compost. Now you can see in here, there's obviously a lot of different material in here that's not going to be sifted through. Some of it's not broken down. Sometimes we'll empty out old pots or something from garden projects we're doing, so there's pieces of plastic in there. All that's fine. And then even like this, an old pepper, it has a label on it that may or may not break down. So that's why it's important to use the sift, so you can sift through there. You can see here's some old spent pots. Now that potting soil is going to go right back into the garden. Should have had that pulled forward just a little bit more. You're just going to want to scoop out a manageable amount, because it can get pretty heavy. Okay, so now that we have the compost ready here to be sifted, I find a square nose shovel works the best. in these plastic trays. Now, this plastic tray is just it's a concrete or a mortar mixing tray. You can get very inexpensively at Home Depot or Menards or Lowe's, any place like that. So now I got the compost in the sieve. What I want to be able to do, we're going to be separating this into different sort of categories. We're going to be sifting it into categories where what's garbage, what's trash, and I'm just going to use a little pot for that because it's not going to be a lot. Now we're just going to start taking, and if you lift this at an angle and just shake it, you're going to get most of that stuff out of there. Now, some of this big stuff, I think I'm going to put this back in the compost. So I'm going to get another pot. Well, actually, I won't need that pot because I have this already empty. And I can just throw some of that items right back in there and just work it. Here's one of my plastic pieces. Put that in that trash area. Now I have a couple of choices here. I can just toss some of this out into the banana patch. That's what I think I'm going to do because I'm going to be harvesting also some food out of here. Like a treat for our chickens. And I told you we have this compost all set up right next to our giant pecan tree. So we're going to process the pecans so the chickens can eat them. I'll go ahead and put those back in there because I don't want to spend a lot of time on separating that stuff. So as we think about, what you can compost, last night we had the leftovers of some pasta that we've been eating on for multiple days. Great pasta, things from the garden. There was artichokes, there was cabbage, tomatoes. But that last little leftover pasta, I could have put that in the compost, but I figured it'd be a great treat for Savannah. She's been working so hard. I figured that would be a great thing for her. But then some of the compost that you may consider composting, if you have chickens, you'll be able to feed the leafy greens and even some items that may have spoiled or something in your kitchen, in the refrigerator, gone past prime. You can certainly put that in your compost, but if you have chickens, they'll certainly eat it and love it. So anything else, that's what you're considering putting into your compost bin. I'm going to throw these oranges because we've been juicing a lot of oranges here, trying to keep our immune system nice and strong and using what we've got at our Flower Street Urban Gardens location, our little homestead. And this is things that we've been doing for years here at our property. Okay, so now this, I want to just sort of bring this up, and what's happening is that a lot of those pecans are falling through to the bottom when I'm lifting it up, because that's what I want to collect now, is the pecans. I'm going to use one of these. I've got about 6 of these tubs that work great in all kinds of gardening projects. I want to just smooth this out, and then I'm going to take this tamper, and I have a little piece of concrete here just for this. And I think all those nuts are pretty much broken. I don't know how that wrench got in there. That's going to take too long to compost. So I'm going to clean that up and put that back in my toolbox. So let's bring this over to the chickens. Now the girls are going to start scratching in that right away. I've already given them some nuts this morning, some of the pecans, so they'll know exactly what to do with it. There's going to be bugs and stuff in there as well. They're going to be able to make amazingly healthy eggs for us also. So we'll leave them to their business, get back over here to some composting. Now as I compost this, I don't want to overload the screen. It's better to do it in small batches. You can use your hand there to separate things where you want to go. So there's a ton of roly-polies, there's worms in here. You know, even though this is an elevated compost, I have no idea how those things get up into that compost, but nature definitely finds a way, and so you'll even find earthworms in there. Now it's pretty easy for me to get out most of this fibrous debris that could have come from any kinds of plant sources that we're putting in there. And then we want to go ahead and separate this for the chickens again. And we'll continue on this process of giving back to the chickens from the compost. The other day I did a video how we're cleaning out the chicken coop, getting the manure, we can sift that. Some of that stuff will end up coming back into the compost. So it's really a closed loop system. And the tighter you can close that loop, the more sustainable, and more importantly in these times, the more resiliency you're gonna have for your community garden, your farm, or just your individual backyard orchards or gardening that you're doing. So a few rules of thumb with the compost. One, in an arid environment, keep it in a shady place. You know, you can keep it on the east side of your house, you know, up against the fence, whatever you have. You can use these tumblers, but try to keep them in a shaded area. You're going to want to have access to water in an arid area to adequately keep the moisture level in it. You know, be really mindful of what you're putting in there, because you can compost pretty much anything. Even some of the heavy metals and things that are in our environment, it's known that those roly-polies that are in the compost and in the soil, they can process all that stuff and break all that down back into organic matter. So Mother Nature has an amazing way of doing this. The other rule of thumb is if you can use it to feed your dog, to feed your chicken or other livestock you may have, you know, use as much as you can that way. It's the most valuable that way. What you do put in there, you know, paper towels, paper plates, newspaper, any kind of food scraps, lawn scraps, old harvest that you may have from your garden, you know, I'll throw that into the chicken coop. They'll eat what they can, and then it will come into the compost. So you can pretty much, it's basically green and brown. Now, green and brown isn't always identified as the color of what you're putting in there. It's that if something that you just consumed, I always use the analogy of coffee grounds. Coffee grounds are brown, and you just consume that. You got the coffee filter, you got the coffee grounds. Because you just consumed it, that would be considered green. So it's close to giving us nourishment, so that would be considered green. Anything brown could be paper plates, old newspaper. A great source of brown is also the shredded things that you put in your home office shredder. What I would recommend is if you got an envelope that has a little plastic seal on it, you know, the window, remove that. So try to clean that up before it comes in the compost the best way that you can. But if you don't, you're going to be sifting it, and you'll be able to get that elements, most of them, out of there. But if it's going through a shredder, I would take as much as that as you can, because it's going to be really small. That's another thing, size matters with this. So the smaller the pieces that you put in, the quicker it's going to break down. Now, some of this element, like we're going to be planting in-ground things as well, and we've got irrigation here, flood irrigation. So we're on the schedule now, starting this last, yesterday we got the water at like midnight, and now we're going to be getting the water runs every 2 weeks, every 14 days, all the way through October. So we're going to be planting in the ground, so our grass is really going to be growing. We've got Bermuda grass, and it's very invasive with the roots, so we'll be able to use the lawn clippings and stuff to put around plants as a natural weed barrier as well. And we'll show you that in future videos. A couple of things to note: we still have some availability for the plant sale, so you gotta call us today to make the arrangements for Saturday and Sunday pickup. So call Yvonne at 602-327-6560. Again, we're only accepting Venmo and credit cards with the 3% on the credit card processing. And then also check out flowerstreeturbangardens.com. This is Alex. Savannah, come here. Come here, girl. And this is Savannah. We'll see you next time.